Studying Edexcel IGCSE English Language and keen to feast your eyes on an outstanding response for a journey into Bhutan, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and learn from Schofield on Shakespeare.
Abbiamo il cuore a strisce, portaci dove vuoi.
So this question is out of 12. You need to show a perceptive understanding of the effects of language and structure and be reasonably technical in your analysis. Try to use some subject terminology for every quotation that you explore. There are 12 marks for this question, so try to analyse 12 quotations split into 4 different paragraphs. However, make sure that you're sharply focused on the question and don't just regurgitate generic analysis from your own annotations. Subject terminology is very important with this exam board. Make sure that your analysis is as technical as possible. This video is going to explore this question. How does the writer Jamie Zepper use language and structure to interest the reader? You should support your answer with close references to the extract, including brief quotations. Jot down this question now. And consider the text in light of this question as it appears on screen at 5-second intervals. You may like to add additional annotations to your own copy of the text, choosing quotations particularly pertinent to this question. Here are my annotations from the first section. Notice that I haven't just underlined keywords and phrases. I've genuinely annotated using technical terminology, such as grammatically incomplete sentence, compound sentence, present participles, figurative language, noun, hyperbolic imagery, and I've explored their effect in relation to the question. So you might like to have a look at my annotations on the text as a whole, pressing pause on each slide to absorb and ponder and possibly add to your own annotations. Time to write your own essay, which you'll be able to compare with mine. How does Zepper use language and structure to interest the reader? Remember to write 4 chunky paragraphs, each exploring 3 quotations. No need for an introduction or a conclusion. Get on with it and press pause now.
How did he get on? Produce a terrific response. Time now to compare your response to mine. Do you think your response would have got 12 out of 12?
The first sentence immediately engages the reader with its dramatic portrayal of the vast landscape. Zepper observes mountains all around, climbing up to peaks, rolling into valleys. This sentence is grammatically incomplete, which creates a more abrupt, breathless feel. Whilst the present participles climbing and rolling give a sense of the scale of the mountains, The mountains themselves soar up to the highest points and smoothly spread far and wide. However, Zeppa is so overawed by the scale of the landscape that she uses an image of a giant child gathering earth in armfuls, piling up rock, pinching mud into ridges to try to capture its effect. This figurative language amuses and interests the reader with the enormous contrast between a child and Bhutan's mountains. Additionally, it makes the process of the landscape being formed seem curiously childish, haphazard and amateur, rather like a child building a sequence of sandcastles and moats at the beach, once again interesting the reader. Further imagery highlighting the narrator's awe at the mountains is shown when she writes that from her hotel room she watched mountains rise to meet the moon. This hyperbolic imagery confirms the extraordinary overpowering height of the mountains, whilst the use of sonorant alliteration creates a soothing, murmuring feel and a synergy between the two natural elements. Zeppa's description of the food and street scenes in Thimphu also interests the reader. She describes a breakfast of instant coffee, powdered milk, plasticky white bread, and flavourless red jam. All adjectives here are negative and suggest distinctly unappealing long-life foods. However, rather than create a negative mood, within the context of the passage as a whole, this description emphasises the remoteness of the location and how far removed it is from Western civilization and norms. The extraordinary exciting difference between Thimphu and other towns across the world is highlighted by the fact that two fellow teachers, Lorna and Sasha, have travelled extensively but are both ecstatic about Bhutan so far. The adverb extensively confirms that the pair have seen a great deal of the world, yet rather than being world weary, they eulogise and exhibit great joy when talking about Bhutan. That said, Bhutan is not so far removed that there are not the occasional signs of Western influence. For instance, the narrator observes or hears teenagers in acid-washed jeans, Willie Nelson's greatest hits, a Rambo poster in a bar. This asyndetic tricolon paints a vivid, multi-century image of Western culture and fashions infiltrating a very old-fashioned, beautiful, remote, proud landscape which interests the reader, particularly given the Bhutanese-ness of everything else. In the middle section of the extract, Zeppa engages the reader as she attempts to describe the Bhutanese people in detail. She states that the women wear a kira and the men a go. Both kira and go are italicised, which confirms that these are Bhutanese nouns and that the local people dress so differently to those in the West that no single English word exists which will adequately describe it. When she tries to describe the go, she suggests it resembles a kimono, except that the top part is exceptionally voluminous. This subordinate clause reinforces the unusualness of the male attire. In some ways it could be seen as similar to a traditional Japanese garment, but actually the top part is much baggier. Zeppa also interests the reader with the way she tries to search for the right word to describe the people. Dignity, unself-consciousness, good humour, grace, but the syntax draws attention to the abstract nouns, which confirm the overwhelmingly positive impression she has of the affability and unpretentiousness of the local people. However, it is interesting how she feels that she cannot quite capture their essence within a single word, and this intrigues the reader. In the final section of the article, the narrator references the history of Bhutan and the fact that it managed to remain independent against the odds. She writes, while the rest of Asia was being overrun by Europeans, only a handful of Westerners found their way into Bhutan. This complex sentence emphasises the incongruity of Bhutan retaining its independence. The verb overrun suggests neighbouring Asian countries were flooded by Europeans and were unable to resist. And yet the noun phrase a handful of Westerners draws attention to the tiny numbers entering and trying to influence Bhutan. For English readers in particular, it is interesting to learn what happened when Ashley Eden visited the country in 1864. Relations with the British took a nasty turn during his disastrous visit. These negative adjectives confirm how British potential colonisers were shunned and rebuffed, thus emphasising the Bhutanese' laudable pride and indomitable spirit. Indeed, it's amusing that Eden had his back slapped, his hair pulled, and his face rubbed with wet dough. This tricolon of passive tense clauses suggests how the British diplomat was mocked and humiliated in a non-life-threatening way, rather like a child could be bullied at school. Nonetheless, within the context of the article, such acts are seen as entirely reasonable. This fine country simply wanted to look after itself and retain its dignity. Why does this achieve the full 12 marks? Well, note the lack of a waffly, overly general introduction, and the fact that the opening sentence immediately answers the question in a specific, detailed way. The question asks for brief quotations, so I follow this decree, paraphrasing the text around the quotation so that I'm not spending too much time copying. Remember the importance of subject terminology for this exam board. You can't just write "this suggests." You need to say what type of sentence, word, literary device has been used. Ensure you have a good coverage of the text as a whole. And just a reminder that I'd recommend tackling the text in chronological order, and remember that splitting the text into 4 sections and analysing 3 quotations from each can ensure you have the right balance.
This has been Schofield on Shakespeare, exploring a journey into Bhutan and giving you a terrific question for response to mull over. Many thanks for watching.